So after I take a pill, we will say the invocation. Which invocation shall we say? The first few words of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the first few words of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, or the mantra that Dhruva Maharaj chanted in the forest? Number two. Who wants number three? Is this a trick question? You heard the choices I gave? That we can chant for the invocation the first few words of the first canto, the first few words of the second canto, or the mantra that Dhruva Maharaj was given by Narada Muni. Yes? They're all the same. You got it. It's a trick question. This is the idea, that we lead people to Krishna. Krishna leads us, it seems, through different methods, but it all ends up at the same goal. That's the point of this. So, we will chant. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Namas Tubhyam Asya Vega Shakti Trayayakila Di Gunaya Prapana Palaya Duranta Shaktaye Kad Indriyanam Anavapya Vartmane Namo Namastubhyam Asya Vega Shakti Traya Yakila Digunaya Prapana Palaya Duranta Shaktaye Kad Indriyanam Anavapya Vartmane Namo. I offer my respectful obeisances. Namaha. Again, I offer my respectful obeisances. Tubhyam. Unto you. Asya. Formidable. Vega. Forces. Shakti. Trayaya. Unto the Supreme Person, who has threefold potencies. Akila, of the universe. D, for the intelligence. Gunaya, who appears as the sense objects. Prapana Palaya, unto the Supreme who gives shelter to the surrendered. Duranta Shaktaye, who possesses energies very difficult to overcome. Kat Indriyanam, by persons unable to control their senses. Anavapya, who is unobtainable. Vartmane, on the path. Translation to Canto 8, Chapter 3, verse 28, from the chapter Gajendra's Prayers of Surrenders. Translation: My Lord, you are the controller of formidable strength in three kinds of energies. You appear as a reservoir of all sense pleasure and the protector of the surrendered souls. You possess unlimited energy, but you are unapproachable by those who are unable to control their senses. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you again and again. Better to do it more times than less, yes? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Attachment, greed, and lust are three formidable forces that prevent one from concentrating upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These forces act because the Supreme Lord does not like to be realized by non-devotees and atheists. However, when one surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, these impediments are withdrawn, and one can realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord is the protector of the surrendered soul. One cannot become a devotee until one surrenders unto the Lord's lotus feet. Then the Lord gives one the intelligence from within by which one can return home back to Godhead. Om Jnana Timaranya Sagana Salakaya Chaksurin Militanyena Tasmai Free Gurave Namaha. So these are obstacles that we have. We'll start with the difficult part and try to move along to something sublime, that we are contaminated by these attachments: greed, lust, anger. Krishna explains this in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, that there's three gates that lead to hell: lust, anger, and greed. Which one of those is good? None of them, that's right. But we tend to think that, well, I'll take one instead of the other. In the verse that starts with Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, that's the 4th chapter, the 10th verse, Krishna says, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past have been purified by transcendental knowledge and thus attained love for me. So we realize these are our obstacles. So we have ways to get free from these obstacles. We study what Krishna gives us knowledge of the Absolute, and we do as the verse explains here. The verse sets up the problem. The problem is that these potencies of attachment, greed, and anger are formidable forces, and they prevent one from concentrating on the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead. It gives us something interesting, though. If we think that these forces prevent us from concentrating on the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, the reverse is also true. If I concentrate on the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, I won't become as interested, and I will give it up completely eventually in this attachment, lust, anger, and greed. This attachment, after all, is based on a false understanding. We take shelter of something temporary. We take shelter of something temporary because we do need to take shelter of something. But we take shelter of the wrong thing, we end up suffering. So we have to understand by culturing knowledge and surrendering at the same time. These impediments may be very great. They're greater than us. There's three energies. There is ourselves. There's the Prakriti, the material nature, the Apara Prakriti, ourselves, that we are small but we are above material nature, and there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. So generally we have the choice to connect with either the matter or the spirit. And the good point here is it says that when one surrenders to the lotus feet of the Lord, these impediments are withdrawn. And that's the amazing thing. Like I asked the question yesterday, we tend to think in material calculations. Like someone asked me when they said, oh, when you told the story of when Krishna manifest as all the cows and cowherd boys, can this be explained? I said, yes, but not by me to you. It can be explained by Krishna to Balaram, because he's the only one that understands this kind of formula. There is an explanation, but it's beyond our understanding to understand what is going on. But the point here is that we have to find the ways and means of surrendering. And by the calculation, we're thinking that, well, if I have more bad material qualities and I have more contaminations from past sins, it will be harder for me to surrender. But you don't need to do it because you're so qualified that you don't need to surrender, right? It doesn't work this way, does it? In fact, the reverse is true. If I feel I'm unqualified, which I am, or if any of us are, and we surrender to Krishna and ask him to give us protection, that protection will come. You know, Krishna explains this in the middle of the Bhagavad-Gita, 10:10. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they come to me. So that's the goal, to be constantly devoted and worship Krishna with love. But since we have these things standing in our way, Arjuna is asking these questions in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. What is it that prevents the living entity from advancing spiritually? And Krishna says it is lust and lust alone. That lust is the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. Because greed and attachment we have an interest in, but lust is pulling us. And it is bigger than we are. But we find that Krishna will devise the ways and means for us to surrender to him. Krishna explains that there's 4 kinds of people. He arranges different things for different kinds of people. There's 4 kinds of people who surrender to him. They're called the Arta and the Arti and the Jignasu and the Jnani. And some people say, well, if we just surrender to Krishna, what difference does it make? Well, number one, it shows that Krishna is using different methods to get us to surrender. And number two, since Krishna consciousness is the medicine, Prabhupada says that you may be sick and the medicine may be in the pharmacy, but it won't help you because you need to go to the doctor and find out what your disease is. So we need to understand these 4 kinds of persons so that when we talk to someone, we can understand which way to preach to them. The arti is the someone who is in great suffering. Is there suffering in this world? Yes. Bigger than the enjoyment? It's like if I hit my toe with a hammer, will it suffer? But how much can my toe enjoy? Seems the capacity to suffer is greater. So Krishna arranges for this person who is suffering to take shelter of him. We find that if we look at everything that happens, I'll explain the 4 kinds first, and then I'll talk about that. The Arta Arti is someone who's very poor and he needs some material things to get by. So he may take shelter of Krishna. And the Jignashu is inquisitive to find out about spiritual life. And the Jnani really wants knowledge of the absolute truth. But Krishna is arranging the ways and the means for each of these persons. We have to understand that in this world, everything that goes on is really a conversation between ourselves and Krishna. We think of good things and bad things that happen. And what we really need to see is that Krishna is arranging different opportunities for us to surrender. Now, of course, if we have a choice, it may be better to be in search of knowledge of the absolute truth. Read what Krishna wants us to do. Read what these pitfalls are, because one of the problems is if we don't know what lust is doing to us, it will be difficult to get away from it. So if we study this, it will be easier. But if we don't understand this, Krishna will arrange to give it to us through some suffering. I've read this before, that sometimes if we're having trouble and we make some mistakes, that Krishna will award us a little suffering. We tend to not like this, right? We don't say, please Krishna, give me some suffering so that I can turn closer to you. But we find that this is the truth of the matter, because all of these things are opportunities. Because as we look at this verse, we find out what is the problem, what is the goal, and what is the solution. The problems are that we are influenced by lust, anger, greed, and attachment. And the other problem is that we are not able to control our senses, to stay away from these things. And the solution and the goal are the same thing, turning to Krishna. And we find that even if we have difficulty, even if we are not qualified, even if we have difficulty controlling the senses, if we ask Krishna to help us, he can protect us. Maybe we can't do it, but Krishna can. And we have to surrender to him so that we can let him do it, because he isn't going to force us to do it. So we remember those things, that we maybe can't do it. Krishna can do it. So let us surrender to him so he can work his miracles on us. And as it was explained yesterday, Gopal said it isn't a big deal for Krishna to purify the things, but we have to turn towards him and let him do this purification for us. So we find that Krishna explains this also in the 7th chapter Bhagavad-Gita, the 4th verse. He says that this divine energy of mine, consisting of the 3 modes of nature, that's goodness, passion, and ignorance, is very difficult to control. So we give up, right? Is that it? It's difficult to control, but we don't try? Is that it? No? But he says it's difficult. Yes? Oh, I forgot the last half of the verse. He says, but for those who surrender unto me, it becomes easy. I didn't really forget it. I'm just trying to remind myself so I don't forget it later. But if we surrender to him, it becomes easy. Think about this. It's difficult. But if we surrender to him, it becomes easy. Now we look at the cost to value ratio. Do we want suffering, repeated birth, and become a slave to lust, anger, greed, and the modes of nature? Or do we want to have eternity, knowledge, and bliss, be happy, joyous, and free, and have an eternal relationship with Krishna? And if we have to think about this, it means we're insane, doesn't it? Yes? So we must be insane to some degree because we're considering it. You know, we think about the kinds of happiness. Happiness, a mode of goodness, is like poison in the beginning, and the happiness in the mode of ignorance is poison in the beginning and the end. So obviously the best choice is the mode of passion, because happiness is right there in the beginning, right? Is that right? This is what appears obvious to us. This is the way it appears, but this isn't really the way that it is it? No. But it appears that way to most people. But we have to deal with what's actually real, not the way we'd like to see it, not the way someone else told us it is, but the way that it really is. So we have to realize that Krishna is giving us these opportunities. Krishna is the controller. We realize we are suffering in this world because we have forgotten the peace formula. Prabhupada explains this in the 29th verse of the 5th chapter. On Wednesday when I was lecturing on Bhagavad-Gita, they said, are you lecturing at 5:30 on verse 5:15, or are you lecturing at 5:15 on verse 5:30? I said, I won't lecture on verse 5:30 of the Bhagavad Gita, and neither will anyone else. Why is that? Yes? The 29th verse is the last verse, that's right. And that's the verse where Krishna says, Bhoktaram Jagdatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. And Prabhupada explains in this that the peace formula is that we have forgotten Krishna in three ways. So if we've forgotten them, we'll try to remember them. One is, as it starts out this verse, Krishna is a supreme controller. There is a God, and it's not us, right? He's a supreme controller. That actually makes us at ease. You know, we worry about all the small things in life, but the sun is 150 kilometers from Earth. Now, if it was 200 kilometers or 150 million, sorry about that, I forgot 6 zeros. The zeros are nothing, but yeah. That's 150 million kilometers, 93 million miles. Sorry about skipping the 6 zeros. Now, if it happened to be only 100 million kilometers away or 200 kilometers away, which one of those is a problem? Both. But this is actually a big deal, but we don't worry about it because somehow we have faith that Krishna or the planets will just keep moving on their own. But we worry about the little details that go on. We find we don't need to worry about those because Krishna is controlling. Krishna is a supreme friend. He can help us out. We have to rely on him to give us advice. We don't think, well, should I take the sense enjoyment or should I take Krishna? You say, Krishna, you're my friend. Let me surrender to you and you can guide me to do what are the appropriate things. And I can read in your literatures to see what you've already given as advice. And the last one is that Krishna is a supreme enjoyer. This is one we struggle with, yes? Say, well, let Krishna be an enjoyer, but I can be also. But when we remember Krishna is a supreme enjoyer, supreme friend, and supreme controller, then we can quit our suffering. But we struggle with the things in this world. We forget that Krishna is actually arranging things in such a way that we can surrender to him. We think we don't like difficulties in this world, yes? But we find that Krishna can arrange for us to surrender to him by providing a nice temple, association of devotees, the chanting of the holy names, the books like Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the tasting of prasadam, the living in a temple or in the holy dham. Or he can also arrange opportunities for us in the way of difficulties. We find Prahlad Maharaj had many difficulties. But did it bother him? His father tried to throw him in the pit of oil. He threw him in a pit of snakes. He caused him so many difficulties. But did Prahlad suffer? No, because he concentrated on the lotus feet of Krishna. We find, as we said there, that there may be so many difficulties, but if I surrender and think of Krishna, then the difficult things become easy. And conversely, when I don't surrender, even the easy things become difficult because I become bewildered. That's what happens with the lust. Krishna explains this in the 2nd chapter. Tell me if this scenario sounds good or not. While contemplating the objects of the senses, lust develops. From lust, anger arises. From anger becomes complete delusion. From delusion becomes bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls into the material world. Does that go from bad to worse to even worse? So where do we stop this? In the beginning. Krishna explains this also in the 3rd chapter. to curb this symbol of sin, lust, in the beginning. We concentrate on that. We put our mind on a leash and pull it away. Krishna says this in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, that from whenever and wherever the mind wanders, one should pull it back under the control of the self. So we put the mind on a leash and we pull it back to Krishna. What does a leash look like? Show me the leash. No, not that one. Where is it? Here, this one. You see here? You attach one side to Krishna, the other side to the mind, and you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is like pouring water on that fire. If there's a fire of material desire, you pour it on there. Because just as we let our senses become uncontrolled, we can't surrender to Krishna. But if we surrender to Krishna, the senses become controlled. So we realize that Krishna makes these things happen through difficulties. Draupadi was being abused by the Kurus. They won her in the gambling match, so they decided to take off her sari. So as the sari was coming off, she had a balanced program, we would think, right? What I'll do is with one hand, I'll depend on myself and hold on to the sari, and with the other hand, I'll call out to Krishna. Sounds like a good plan, right? Cover all the bases. Don't just depend on yourself and don't just depend on Krishna, right? Is that the best plan? Cover all the bases? Sounds like it should be good, but it didn't work out so well. And this is something we see. When she saw it wasn't working, she reached up to Krishna. And Krishna supplied the extra sari. Krishna will provide what we need, but we have to surrender and stay close to him. Then he will provide what we need. This is the key to this, that we provide that. So we found that when she surrendered to Krishna completely, even in this difficulty, Krishna supplied the extra cloth. We think this is why Kunti Devi even prayed that whenever there's difficulties, you appear before us. Therefore, I pray that these difficulties happen again and again. Because if the result is you get Krishna, then that is why Krishna says he awards us with some suffering. Because if the suffering makes us depend on Krishna, and because of that, we surrender to him, and even if we can't control our senses, he scares us into doing it, right? It's like the thief says, give me your money. He says, I am not willing to surrender my money. He puts the gun at your head and says, now you're willing? He says, now I surrender it. Yes? Because we're in difficulty. So when are we in difficulty in this world? Which day is dangerous? Only the days that end in Y, right? Is that it? So when the danger happens, right? My friend Dwarkadish was driving home from work last week and was in a bad accident and was in the hospital, died the next day. I mean, people are afraid to fly in an airplane, and yet you find that going 2 kilometers is probably the same danger as flying all the way around the world. That's how dangerous it is. In India, they kill 145,000 people every year. So it's dangerous just crossing the street. But if we surrender to Krishna, these dangers, ocean of miseries, shrink to the amount of water that you would find in a calf print. We find someone like Ajamil. He was even very sinful. He wasn't controlling his senses, was he? He saw the prostitute enjoying, so he thought, well, I'll try that too. But then when he was about to die, the Yamadutas came to pull him out of his body. Did that scare him? And he called out for Narayan. It was his son Narayan, but he had made the point of naming his son after the personality of Godhead. And he cried out with such despair that his chanting was unoffensive chanting. And so the Vishnu Dutas came to save him. So in his case, was the distress something good or something bad? It was good, right? So we should all pray for some more distress. Either that or distress comes, we take the opportunity to surrender to Krishna. So our whole life is a preparation. Let me surrender to Krishna first. It's like people get insurance. So if there's an accident, then it will pay the damages. Do you get insurance before the accident or after it? Before. So we try to surrender to Krishna before we get entangled in all the problems that Ajamil did. But even if we got entangled, it's still better to do it later. But like the insurance, it works better if you do it ahead of time. We find some other people. Arjuna was in great difficulty and didn't know what to do because on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was going to have to fight and kill all of his relatives. And he was in great distress. But this distress caused him to tell Krishna that I am a soul surrendered to you and a disciple. Now please instruct me. We have to be like a blank sheet of paper. This is why sometimes we find that people from Western countries, or even Indians who came to America who don't know anything about Vedic culture, sometimes they end up getting more knowledge of Krishna than people who already have so many ideas. It's amazing. People tell me so many ideas that what you do and don't do that really don't check out shastrically. And they forget that now we have Google, and you just Google it. Like you see someone chanting with beads, you Google chanting with beads and bag, and it explains about japa bag and Hare Krishna. Everything is explained there. So sometimes some Indian people tell me some things which aren't exactly correct. They heard it somewhere else. And I said, I Googled that. I didn't find it anywhere in Shastra. And they always say, well, it's in the Padma Purana. Because it's a big one, right? It must be in there somewhere, right? But we find that if we come to the spiritual master as a blank sheet, we come to learn from him submissively. We don't go to him and if I want to learn cricket, do I go to Sachin Tendulkar and ask him to teach me, or do I share with him what I know about cricket, which is it's a sport, they use a bat, they have wickets, and there's 11 people. That's all I know. So do I start sharing my vast knowledge, or do I learn from him how to play? So we find that sometimes people think, well, I'm born in Bhagavad-Gita, I already know the Bhagavad-Gita. One person said that to Tukaram in Laguna Beach. He says, yes, he says, I'm born in India, I know Bhagavad-Gita, and Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita that life is just a game, you just have to play it. So Tukaram says, really, where is that verse? And he's nervously looking through it. You know why he didn't find it? It's not there, right? But they have his ideas about if you're going to quote from the book, better to find something that's actually there. Isn't it true? So we find that we can culture this knowledge, we can surrender with the easy points, or we can suffer the difficulties. And the difficulties can help us to surrender to Krishna. And when we see the difficulties that some of these devotees have, we can realize that it's possible for us too. Dhruva Maharaj went to sit on the lap of his father. His mother was named Suniti, but his father liked Saruchi more than Suniti, the other wife, the stepmother. You probably don't have those here, but we have those in America. So the stepmother told him, you can't sit on my father's lap. You didn't come from my womb, right? So I got Saruchi'd in my life because I had a stepmother that my father would say, oh, my wife can't take visitors now. Only her family members can come to visit now, right? So we find this can happen in our life. So solution is, under all these, there's many difficulties, but what is the solution? Cry about it? No, surrender to Krishna. And Dhruva Maharaj went, and he chanted the mantra we just chanted, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And he did want to have some material things granted. He wanted a kingdom greater than his father's, greater than his grandfather, and even greater than great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, right? Swayambhuva Manu was grandfather, Brahma is a great-grandfather. But when he was meditating on Krishna and he was seeing him, all of a sudden he disappeared and opened his eyes, and there was Vishnu. Then he forgot about all the things he wanted, because he had more than what he thought he could ever need. So we find that when we're given these opportunities to surrender to Krishna, if we're put in distress, doesn't even matter if we don't succeed, if we get some trouble. If we served Krishna or surrendered to Krishna, we're the winner. Sita was being kidnapped by Ravana, and the bird Jatayu, he was no match for Ravana, but he had the devotion for Lord Rama, and he wanted to do the service of trying. Didn't matter if he could succeed or fail. He wanted to stop Ravana from kidnapping Sita. So he fought the battle, and Ravana escaped, but when Lord Rama came, he put him in his arms, and he did the funeral rites for the bird. So even though he failed materially, he succeeded spiritually. And this is always the case. Bali Maharaj was in front of Vamanadev, and the dwarf asked 3 steps of land. Shouldn't be a problem, right? 3 steps, he's only a dwarf, right? Shouldn't be a problem, should it? I have so many planets, I have control of it all. He's a dwarf, how much can he take with 3 steps? So, with the 2nd step, he broke through the universe and let some water from the Kajal ocean in. So he says, well, now I've taken up 2 steps. He says, where can I put the 3rd? He says, well, Bali Maharaj says, I surrender to you completely. And you can put the 3rd step on my head. And he still got arrested. He got arrested for not being able to live up to his promise. But eventually, he was able to go back to his planet, and he surrendered to Krishna. And we realize it doesn't matter what the consequences are. We have to give everyone to Krishna. In the 50s, there was the TV show about Jack Benny, and he was a miser, a kripana, a very cheap person. He'd always ask his servant, did you get it cheap? How cheap was it? Did you get it cheap? And so the thief puts the gun at his head and says, give me your money or give me your life. And so Bing Crosby doesn't say anything. And he says, well, which one is it, your money or your life? He doesn't say anything. He says, come on. He says, I'm considering it. It's a difficult decision. So we're thinking about this. Do I give up everything to Krishna, or do I try to keep it all for myself? If we're going to lose it anyway, how difficult is it? We're going to lose it, right? So, because he had a lot of money, it was better he give up his life and keep the money, right? Is that a good choice? Can you do that? You can't. People think they can, though, right? I'll take it with me. No, but it doesn't work. So the solution is, and the amazing part is, it doesn't matter how contaminated we are. It's not based on us. It's based on Krishna. And if we surrender to him, we get that energy, right? Just like we have electric socket. You may be an electrical engineer, but if I'm not, but I stick the fork in the socket, I'm going to have more contact with electricity than you do. Don't try that, though. Try something simple like turning on the light, right? And we see examples. The great devotees had this kinds of suffering, like Arjuna. And particularly, Srila Prabhupada had this. Srila Prabhupada came to America on a luxury cruise ship. And when he got here, there were people waiting for him with lots of money. And then when he wrote to his godbrothers, they sent money, and they all came to help him engage in this Krishna consciousness movement. Did I get some details wrong? Okay, we'll go back. He wasn't a cruise line, it was a cargo ship. They advertise sometimes the going on the luxury liners, but they never advertise, travel with the cargo. Do they? There's no ad like this, to travel in a cargo ship. And when he got there, he didn't know whether to turn right or left. But Krishna helped him out. It's funny, at Bhakti Vaibhava Puri Maharaj, somebody asked him, why didn't you go to help Prabhupada? He says, well, it must have been that Krishna wanted him to have all the glory. So we have to remember that he did this himself. But he didn't have to do it by himself because he had Krishna. And we have the same thing. And Prabhupada can help do us. So we have to help nurture each other and give each other the mercy so that they know that they can surrender to Krishna. So that they know it doesn't matter how qualified you are. If you stick the fork in the electric socket, you'll find out what electricity is really fast. So we won't try that, but we'll surrender to Krishna with the same enthusiasm and lack of fear. If we're already distressed, what are we afraid of? We're afraid of giving up our suffering. We're attached to our suffering and don't want to give it up. But I do find that when some difficulties come like this, it actually makes us easier to surrender to Krishna and take shelter of him. I had this experience in South Africa in 1972. 5 thieves came in the door, 4 with guns and 1 with a crowbar. The one stuck a gun at my head, says, get under the bed. And he has the gun at my head. And I'm chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the one with the crowbar said, shoot him. The one with the gun said, no, we don't need to shoot him. And the other one said, no, we don't need witnesses. We want to rob the place with no witnesses. So they're arguing about whether to shoot me or not. Now did I think, well, I don't need to chant so clearly today. I can always chant better tomorrow. Or did I think, this may be my last opportunity. Krishna, you better prepare a place for me because it looks like this is it. So I chanted 2 very attentive rounds. So I don't pray to have a gun at my head again. But it was actually a wonderful opportunity to take shelter of Krishna in what appears to be the last minute. But how do we know what the last minute is? A few ticks ago of the cosmic clock, I was a child coming to the temple. And now I'm 66 years old. So the time comes along. And so we have to remember that the only qualification we have is the willingness to surrender. Am I willing? And it's amazing that how that disqualifies many people. So from this day forward, Lord Rama says that someone who says that from this day forward, I am yours, he accepts them and he gives them the courage to get through it. So I may not have the courage. I may not have the strength to control my senses, which is actually a fact. But if I surrender to Krishna and turn my life and will over to him and ask him to withdraw these difficulties, he will actually do it. And we find when the difficulties are withdrawn and we're not being pulled around like a slave by lust, anger, and greed, we actually become happy, joyous, and free in Krishna's service. So looking at the options, we should realize that it is time for us to surrender at every moment and ask Krishna to please protect me, because I know on my own I'm doomed. But with Krishna's help and protection, there's hope even for me. So any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I was just wondering that in India, though we have been born and brought up with Shastra, Krishna, we keep hearing about these things right from the childhood. Still, it takes a lot to have this faith that Krishna is the supreme. Shastra has everything that we need. So I was just wondering, how did you all develop this such exceptionally strong faith, not having any context or any background and all these things?
Well, a faith means that you have to have, Prabhupada explains as unflinching trust in something sublime. enough, you have to have enough to do the experiment. If I say that there's water in here, you say, well, I don't believe it. You know, the people say don't have blind faith but blind doubt. But if I say there's water here, aren't you willing to come and do the experiment? Because the idea, just like we're saying, you can speculate about electricity and hear about it. But the idea is it's different when we surrender to Krishna than when we just observe it. Isn't it? Are we observing Krishna? And the problem is we have that many Brahmins in India teach a karma kanda, where we do some benefit, some puja, to get some material benefit back. This isn't what we're talking about here. This isn't going to help us control the senses. This isn't going to help us get withdrawn from our lust, anger, and greed. We need to surrender to Krishna and devote ourselves to Him. It's funny, the one comedian, he must have gotten this from Prabhupada, because he said, you know, it's amazing. He said the shopkeeper is praying to God, please God, make sure my shop is locked so no thief can get in. And the thief is praying, please God, make sure the shop is unlocked so I can get in. He said, but what would be the use of being God if you didn't know what to do until someone prayed to you to tell you what to do? So we're sitting around thinking that, okay, God, now I'll tell you what needs to happen. Do you really, it's like you're saying, okay, God, now I'm going to tell you how to keep the earth exactly in the orbit it's supposed to be, right? So we have to not think of there's different gods and we pray to each of them depending on what we want. That's different. Just like if you have a friend. If I'm your friend and I just want to help you out and do good things for you, is that the same as say, hey, I need to ride to Delhi, and then I need some money, then I need to help me pack my suitcase, then I need this, and don't worry, I won't call you until I need something else. Right? Which kind of friend is better? So they teach something about reading it, or do they teach surrender to Krishna? Or is it just a story? Right? Some people may have it, but the idea is we need to do something about it. Yes? Yes?
I have a question. Thank you very much for a very wonderful class. You talked about Lord surrender. How do we effectively surrender to Lord Krishna?
It's a process. The process we do, we're given things that it isn't like, so some Christian people say, well, you just surrender to your life to Jesus and then you go on, but just in name only. It's like, I love you, okay, now go do what I want. In name only. It's a process. We don't plant, do we plant a bhakti tree or a bhakti lata beach? Which one? Seed or a tree? We start with the seed, right? We start with something, so it's a process.
So how is this
Krishna explains too that of sacrifices that we offer the sacrifice of hearing in the fire of the controlled mind. So we have different processes starting with Shravanam, Kirtanam, that when we're chanting, we hear the chanting attentively. We add Krishna, it's math, we add Krishna and we subtract material attachments. I concentrate, I pull my mind away from material things, and when I'm chanting, I concentrate on the chanting. I spend the time to read about Krishna's Nama, Guna, Rupa, and Leela, and about his instructions. This is the Shravanam and Smaranam. We do Sevanam. We offer prayers to Krishna, glorifying Krishna, asking him to remove these difficulties of sense attachment that stand in the way of our being able to serve him. We do deity service. We either do the service ourselves or we come to see the deity in the morning. We decide to wake up early, which means I go to bed early. We don't, other people, like people who are the time of awakening for self-control is type of sleep for the general people. People who like to party, they like to stay up late until they drop and then wake up late in the morning. But we say, okay, Krishna, I'll surrender my ideas of enjoying and I'll go to sleep early so that I can what? Wake up early. Because if we go to bed late, what do? wake up late. So the first thing, we start the day, if we put Krishna first, then it works out. So first thing I do, I wake up, I pay my obeisances to my spiritual master. I offer myself to him, first thing, right? Then I go prepare myself, go take a shower, clean the dirty body off, put on tilak, mark the body as a temple, go to the temple, see the deity, chant the names of the deity, and then chant with rapt attention on the beads, asking Krishna to serve him and asking him to remove these anarthas. So the surrendering is a process. We do it as a process. And we try every day to concentrate a little more on Krishna. We don't put it up on the wall like, I'm a devotee or I'm a Hindu. We practice Krishna consciousness, right? We do it. It's something we do, not something we just believe in, right? You may believe in 50-carat emeralds and kilos of gold, but it won't make you rich. You have to go get one. So the belief is there to make us try it. You can believe in food, but you won't get nourished. You actually have to eat it. Prabhupada says we can't lick the outside surface of the bottle. We have to go inside to taste the honey. So this is the process, is that we're always at a crossroads. We're choosing Krishna or we're choosing our selfish desires. We're either Krishna-centered or selfish-centered. And so it's a process of trying. We want to be at 100%, but anartha nivriti is 60-70% detachment. So we try to arrange ourselves in a way that we're somewhat detached. We go to bed early. We offer ourselves to the spiritual master. We don't take intoxicants or have illicit sex. Obviously, we don't eat meat, but for people who have been a vegetarian a long time, you don't have to pray. Like my children and grandchild never eaten meat. And my granddaughter asked Indian people in America, you're from India, how is it that you're eating meat? And they said, well, it's hard to find vegetarian food in America, and it's difficult to be a vegetarian. She said, I'm 27 years old and I've never eaten meat. It's obviously possible, isn't it? She made it through 27 years without eating meat, so it's and we have to do these for a real reason. Like some of the people in India are told, don't ask questions, we just don't eat meat, it's our family tradition. It's just like cricket is a sport in India and baseball is a sport in America. And it's easy to give up one or the other, but you don't want to give up money, right? It's valuable. So we have to understand the intrinsic value of these things, that we offer food to Krishna, that it's ahimsa food, and then we don't get involved in bad karma and we're only eating Krishna prasadam. So we have to get the real knowledge. Some people in India get some of it, sometimes they get it mixed with other things. And I'm amazed at how many things. And today, you can just Google something, whether it's correct or not, it'll tell you. Or although you start with Bhagavad-Gita, basic things are there. Is that fine?
So the process would be pleasing Krishna.
Yes.
If you please Krishna all the time, and you're surrendering.
Yes, the more if you can't do it all the time, at least do it more often than not. And try to do it more than yesterday. And doesn't matter if yesterday's rounds were good or bad, you tried to chant today clearly. We try to improve and increase, not think, let me do less. I love you so much, but I will do less for you. Yes? Increase and improve and concentrate. Increase, improve, and concentrate. Think about those ideas, right? Think about something that you're doing instead of something else. Yes? The brain has a thing called a reticular regulator, that if you're concentrating on something, it makes everything else wait till later. But if you think, oh, I wonder what's on the computer or the TV, then the brain says, okay, now the chanting is second, this becomes first. So we have to decide what is most important and concentrate on that. Is that fine? Should we try this process out? We have it so nicely arranged. Someone just says, well, surrender to Krishna. How do I do that? So if I say, dance the gobbledygook dance, go learn it right now. But you have no idea how to do this. We have a process of how to do it. We should be thankful. The Christians say, well, just surrender to Jesus. But it's difficult to know exactly how to do this. Krishna has made it easy for us. It may be easy, but it's simple, but it's not always easy. But it's possible when we surrender to Krishna. That's the good point. The difficulties can be withdrawn when we surrender to Krishna. And if we get it through knowledge of the absolute truth or inquisitive, that's good. And if we don't, Krishna will award us a little suffering. That's good. But let's try the knowledge of the absolute first. Thank you. Hare Krishna.